Good morning. Good to see everyone. It really is such a blessing to practice together. And as our world is unfolding day by day, as our various countries' karma is arising, our challenges to maintain loving kindness is our practice path and the occasion of our practice path. And I remember Kenmo Chinley saying, it's our pop quiz. So what's going on in the news is our pop quiz. So today I want to revisit near enemies in the chapter from Venerable Pema Children's book, The Places That Scare You. And although we did the near enemies of loving kindness, we didn't do the near enemies of compassion. And contained within the near enemies of compassion is idiot compassion, which is important to bear in mind. So Venerable Pema presents three enemies of compassion: pity, overwhelm, and idiot compassion. Pity has to do with a slightly obscured mindset when we're practicing loving kindness. And today I'm going to refer both to our daily life and to our meditation practice, because they're aspects that are the same and different in both. But pity has to do with cultivating a mindset of helper and helped. I have, you need, or I am powerful, you are powerless type of mindset. And it's easy in our visualizations and in our service activities to see ourselves as the helper. If we have that dynamic, we're missing the opportunity of the mutuality of the human condition and the blessings of the gifts, as well as the evolution towards what we call the three spheres of emptiness: the emptiness of the giver, the emptiness of the gift, and the emptiness of the receiver. So, we can start to understand when pity arises, oh, that's a slightly, hitting the white line when we're driving, as opposed to being in the middle of the road. The second enemy, which many folks may be feeling at this particular moment, is overwhelm. The sense of being helpless in the conditions that are arising in our daily life, in our various countries, or the conditions that are arising in our imagination when we're visualizing different types of suffering, either in the World Peace Prayer or in our loving kindness practice. And what I find very interesting is that it's very easy for us to reference very common psychological teachings or trainings that you may have received in your profession or as a volunteer, in terms of the necessity of a very defined boundary. And on the one hand, it's very helpful, and when you're in training, it's particularly helpful, but it doesn't have to be maintained fiercely forever. In fact, in some ways, it is in conjunction with the fear of feeling too much and the danger of not feeling enough. And The example I'm going to give for this is from my experience as working at the Connecticut Hospice. And I worked there at a really interesting period when it was the height of the AIDS crisis, and the nurses were experiencing burnout. And what they found was they were emotionally overwhelmed, and the combination of the professional standard of a boundary, the emotionally overwhelmed because they were very compassionate, resulted in an incapacity essentially to do their jobs. They found, and it was extraordinarily painful for them to admit that what was happening when their patients were dying is they would find an excuse to leave the bedside, to go to the supply closet. And it was because they had gotten into a bind. So what we're learning in the loving kindness practice is really how to work with a boundary. And there are times in our training when the boundary is perfectly appropriate and necessary. And in fact, when we are doing the loving kindness practice and we've run out of friends, we've run out of neutral people, eventually more difficult people will arise in our imagination. And in all of those cases, we have been training, first with our friends, then with fairly neutral people, that we are looking for that edge. And I'm not going to call it a boundary, I'm just going to call it an edge in our capacity, where our heart starts to put limits, or where we notice that we have limits. And the actual practice is to, in multiple ways, as we deepen our practice, to look at what is the nature of that boundary. Can the boundary become porous? Can we move it a millimeter today? Eventually, can we dissolve that boundary relative to one individual, and eventually growing our capacity limitlessly? So it's a very interesting process, and there's a difference between a boundary we may need because some aspects of the various people arising, and over time everyone arises in your mind, that are not appropriate for your capacity right now, and a fear we might have of pain, which is different, and the goal, which is to be able to open unconditionally to all sentient beings and eventually dissolve duality. So when we're working for just a few, like 10 minutes or so on Sunday mornings, you might not quite encounter the kind of complexity that you might encounter in retreat or spending a couple of hours doing this practice. And it's good to know that there isn't something wrong when you see your edge or when a boundary fiercely arises. This is exactly what we want to see. And the deconstruction of that wall, or the creating a permeating wall is something that's gradual and part of the actual practice itself. So in her discussion of overwhelm, Pema suggests two approaches. One is taking the situation that arises in our mind, or we could say in life, and making it smaller. So making it smaller or making it workable. Workable is another word that she uses. So we might intentionally restrict our practice to friendly or neutral people for some time. That is a lot to open unconditionally to even one person in your imagination. And gradually, as you build strength and confidence in your practice, allowing your attention to go to irritating people, and perhaps if something feels unsafe to you, saying an aspiration, one day may I be able to fully offer loving kindness to you. For now, I let go and continue the meditation with friendly or neutral people. The second point she makes is when we're practicing to be aware of where our attention is. In any of these bodhicitta practices, loving kindness, or perhaps the World Peace Prayer, or perhaps the Tonglen practice, our intention is to open our hearts to what we see as another sentient being. For now, we're still experiencing ourselves as a self and all sentient beings as appearances that arise in our imagination. But where is our focus as we're doing this? And so I want to look at what is helpful and what's not so helpful. So I'm going to give an example from a lecture that Khandro Rinpoche did. And she was talking in this situation about Tonglen practice, but it applies to our loving kindness practice as well. That she'd look around the room and she'd see, various people sobbing. And then she sort of walked a thin line of teasing and chiding her students, saying, well, if you're sobbing away during your Tonglen practice, I expect that your focus has turned back to you, not the suffering of the other person, but that it is hurting you to open to the suffering of the world. And that defeats the purpose of the Tonglen practice. So Pema Chödrön is essentially saying the same thing, looking to see and checking periodically when you're feeling overwhelmed, has your attention turned from the person in front of you or the situation in front of you to how you feel about that situation. And that gets you caught up in your emotions as opposed to alertly seeing, I'm bumping up against a barrier. How can I look at this limit that I'm clearly seeing right now, and how can I work with this limit? Do you see that that's actually two different things? And that sort of goes into the third near enemy, which is idiot compassion. So when we're practicing this loving kindness practice on our cushion, we're intentionally setting up a safe space. And we have freedom of choice in our imagination. So we are free to separate what we feel is appropriate for our mental health to work on right now, and what may not be appropriate for our mental health to work with right now. And so that's a healthy use of a boundary. If we understand that if I open my heart unconditionally to this person in, now or in the past, I can evoke PTSD. And PTSD is not helpful in growing your loving kindness practice. That is a situation that needs to be worked with very, very carefully, and perhaps with a therapist. So it's perfectly healthy to set up mental boundaries that you're aware of when you're learning this loving kindness practice. In fact, all of the bodhicitta practices are supposed to be done slowly, steadily, not rushed, and not with an expectation that I should be able to do this because the texts say that this is what all the great students are able to do. In the Uttara Tantra, there's one example that's given of different capacities. So we need to be aware of our own capacity of the safety of our cushion, which may be different from our capacity in daily life. And we're working, knowing our capacity, and just gradually bumping up against that edge or that limit until that is workable with unconditional loving kindness. And then we can push to maybe another limit. But going back to the Uttara Tantra, when it talks about capacities, it doesn't talk really about the capacity of the example I remember isn't about a normal person or someone on the path to becoming a bodhisattva, but it distinguishes between a bodhisattva and a Buddha. So the capacity of a bodhisattva is like an ox's hoof print, where the capacity of the Buddha is like an ocean. So the Buddha can walk right through a war, fearlessly, holding a mind at peace. A Buddha could, walk the streets in Minnesota with vast loving kindness, compassion, and radiance of that, such that everyone could drop their anger. We may not be there yet, and we are not trying to go fast or go beyond our capacity, because we can become discouraged. We have to have skillful means in our meditation and in our life to see where is our growing edge, how to work with that growing edge, when can it be pushed, when and how to keep growing, as opposed to thinking, I must not be a good practitioner because I can't do this yet. And one of the stories from the sutras is actually pretty horrifying. It's so horrifying, it left an indelible mark on my memory. It's these two students of the Buddha went out on their alms round, and they met these very evil people, and the evil people said to them, oh, you're a student of the Buddha. I'm told that, the Buddha students are very, very generous. I'm told that you give, whatever is needed, that you have such compassion for suffering that I need an eye. I'm desperate, I'm going blind, I need an eye, and if you're a student of the Buddha, then you should be able to do that. So these, young in meditation students gave their eye, and the evildoer threw it on the floor and stomped on it. And the poor student went, why'd you do that? And the evil person said, well, I just like hearing how it pops. So there are situations that are beyond us, and it is not skillful to rush ahead of ourselves. It is skillful to know where we are and to slowly expand as we are able, and to see very, very skillfully what is needed in this situation. Am I able to be in this situation, or is this situation beyond me in life or in our imaginations? So you can imagine if you have situations that you're unprepared for and feel as though you've failed in some way, you might say, oh, this Buddhist path is not right for me, this Bodhisattva path is not right for me, I have to stop. And that's exactly why all of the teachings of the developing compassion and Bodhisattva qualities are meant to be slow and steady. It is true that some of the great bodhisattvas have offered their body or parts of their body, and there's a wonderful verse in Shantideva that says, when you can give a part of your body as though you're giving a cabbage, then maybe you're ready. And cabbage was the most cheap and abundant vegetable. So as we're doing this, and as we're becoming more familiar with this practice and taking it to heart and practicing it more deeply, at any time, anything can arise in your mind in retreat. Any of the wounds that ever happened arise in your mind, and you alone can decide, is this suitable or not suitable at this time for me? And as we're spending time with the practice, we can look at, well, how is it that we work with the fear that arises, a fierce boundary that arises, the desire to embody loving kindness and compassion towards all sentient beings. In the practice, in this particular practice, loving kindness practice, the teaching is every time you see even the slightest waning of your loving kindness, that you go back, revitalize, regenerate it, and start again. And if there's a recurring difficult person that arises, you can make the aspiration, one day may I be able to fully open in loving kindness towards this person, and allow yourself to just move to the next person that arises in your imagination, to a friend or a neutral group. Or if you decide that you're ready and you feel like you have meditation skills that would allow an opening to, and I'm not suggesting PTSD, but a more difficult situation, you might start with equanimity. So as I mentioned in previous teachings, when we're working with loving kindness, we're working with the four immeasurables. Eventually, all of the four immeasurables are activated, but when we're working with this more difficult situation in our lives, we might say, all right, I notice in my loving kindness practice, I have a history with this person, they're always arising. I'm going to switch to equanimity for right now. When this person arises in my imagination, can I be at ease, not opening with loving kindness first, just with no judgmental, emotional, or closing down response. And one way to do that is the quality that we were working with much early on, looking at the response of your body. Can I allow this person to arise in my imagination without any cells anywhere shutting down, without tension arising in my body somewhere relative to this person? So you can slowly build a non-reactive quality, then move towards this person is a sentient being with hopes and fears just like me, then eventually opening with loving kindness. So this practice isn't just a 10-minute practice. It can be months of retreat. It can be deeply healing, but it's not to be rushed or unsafe. So the idiot compassion is when either we feel that we should be able to do something that we're not able to do, or we move beyond our capacity, get overwhelmed, discouraged, and quit the practice. So we're always walking a fine line of exploring with curiosity, reflecting on, is our loving kindness waning? Do we need to take another approach? This is different than earlier Venerable Pema's admonition, or Khandro Rinpoche's admonition, being caught in feelings and our own feelings. It's not about that at all. It's about becoming skillful and looking at, okay, this is the barrier in this moment. What are all the skills I have learned over time that meet this moment in a very slow, steady way that allow me to soften? With the aspiration, one day may I be able to look at anyone in, our whole mental history, anyone we observe in the world. May there be no limits in the limitless sentient beings. So I'm not sure there's so much time to practice, and I'd like, particularly because idiot compassion is a sensitive issue, I'd like to open it to questions, but I'll do a dedication and we'll close the YouTube, so it's a private discussion. Bodhicitta, excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher.